Good morning. Today, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau Commission releases our third and final report into the investigation of the mid-air collision between two scenic flight helicopters on the Gold Coast on the 2nd of January 2023. A collision in which 3 passengers and 1 of the pilots lost their lives, and the second pilot and 5 passengers were seriously injured. I also acknowledge that beyond the physical injuries suffered by those on board, many people have been deeply affected by this incident. In all, our investigation has made 28 findings that highlight key safety lessons for both aviation operators and pilots. The most fundamental of which is that when making changes to aviation operations, even those that have been designed to increase safety can have unintended consequences. This tragic accident occurred only a week after the operator had introduced 2 new helicopters into its tourist flight operation from the SeaWorld theme park. Since buying the business, the operator had made changes to improve its tourism product, including the commissioning of a new second helipad location, the introduction of larger EC-130 helicopters, plus a new hangar, office and crew rest facilities. However, over time, a number of these changes undermined what were existing risk controls used to manage aircraft separation. The new helicopters, unlike their squirrel predecessors, were not equipped with the UHF internal company radios, nor iPads with maps showing real-time positions of other aircraft, or the high visibility paint on all of the rotor blades. However, most importantly, the introduction of the second helipad 9 months earlier created a constant and defined conflict point between launching and landing helicopters, a point in which ultimately and tragically the 2 helicopters collided. Around 2 minutes before the collision, an inbound call from the landing helicopter failed to register with the departing pilot, who at the time was busy loading passengers. Then, once passenger loading was complete, a member of the ground crew advised the departing pilot that the airspace was clear. However, this advice was outdated by the time the helicopter eventually took off 20 seconds later. In these 20 seconds, the inbound helicopter, travelling at over 180 kilometres an hour, was now 800 metres closer to the conflict point. As his helicopter transited down the Broadwater, the approaching pilot had sighted the departing helicopter loading passengers, but did not receive a taxiing call, which would indicate departure was imminent and thus act as his trigger that separation was required. Failure to receive this call, which video evidence suggests was made by the departing pilot, was most likely due to faults the ATSB found in the departing helicopter's radio antenna. Our investigation has also confirmed through a detailed visibility study that both pilots had very limited opportunities to detect the other aircraft. Our study digitally recreated the physical structures of the helicopters, validated thousands of data points from onboard recording devices, and analysed extensive footage from multiple cameras both within and external to the 2 aircraft. The visibility constraints faced by the pilots, combined with their competing operational priorities and their understanding that the airspace was clear, ultimately led to the mid-air collision as both helicopters passed through the conflict point. A number of holes lined up for this accident to occur. Commercial aviation must have multiple safety defences in place. It should never be vulnerable to single point failures such as a faulty radio or pilot's ability to visually detect another aircraft in the sky. This report does also detail safety actions subsequently undertaken by the operator in response to the accident, and I do commend them for that. However, whilst acknowledging the safety actions taken to date, 4 issues raised by the ATSB are yet to be adequately addressed. These now form the basis of formal recommendations to the operator. The most significant focus is on increasing opportunities for pilots to detect conflicting traffic through further mitigation or elimination of conflict points. We would also like to see implementation of a formal process of how future changes to flight operations will be considered. Finally, occupant survivability was another focus of the investigation. Whenever we see some occupants survive a crash and others fatally injured, we seek to understand why. Our investigation found that passenger seatbelts were incorrectly fitted. This evidence was primarily gathered through mobile phone footage and consistent with what we discovered internationally with other aviation tourism operations. While the ATSB was unable to determine the extent to which the incorrectly fitted seatbelts contributed to passenger injuries, primarily as so many forces come into play in an accident of this nature, we know that correctly fitted restraints improve survivability for passengers. This has been a very complex investigation that has uncovered how a series of compounding risk failures led to a catastrophic outcome. I sincerely hope lessons from this tragic incident will lead to safety improvement in Australia's aviation tourism sector and, importantly, worldwide. I'm now happy to take your questions.